All right, we are on live. Hey, everybody, Robin Robbins here with the Great Minds Drink Alike podcast. How y'all doing out there? I hope you guys are doing good. I've got Mike Stodola with me.
Hey.
One of my favorites, like Hollywood Squares. I don't know how your screen's set up, but he's right below me. And yeah, super excited today. I've got Tom McDougall, who is founder of High Point Networks, and as you saw from the promotions, Tom is a badass when it comes to running an MSP IT services business. So Tom, hey, how are you, man?
I'm fantastic, Robin. How about you?
Good. We talked, how long ago was it? Like, it had to be over 8 years ago, because I think it was before I had my second kid.
Yeah, it had to be, I bet it was more like 10 or 11 years ago. I don't remember exactly. It would have been, let me ask you this. Do you remember, were we in our new building when we talked? I don't remember for sure.
I don't either. So just so everybody gets the context. And, I was doing research with a bunch of MSPs that are larger MSPs. And I was writing my book. I have the ultimate success secret little book we send out to new customers and whatnot. And so I was interviewing what do really highly successful CEOs in our industry do? How do they make decisions, and et cetera. And so, I'm working through updating that now. And I came across your story, and that's why I reached out to you. I was like, hey, it's been a little bit, it's been a minute. I think back then you were doing 30 million.
Yeah, it would have been, that probably would have been about 8 or 9 years ago, somewhere in that range. And I remember the interview because we were a little bit at odds, because you were hoping that I was going to answer some questions in the way that you were expecting them to, and I didn't. And I just remember it being a fascinating interview.
Okay, because I don't remember that. I just remember just like loving everything you're saying, but hey, what the heck, right? So, but because like the thing is, whenever, when I interview people, hey, let me tell you something. I know we're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff, but when I did that interview series, that I was surprised by a number of things that people had said, right? And like looking back in hindsight and growing my own business, like I really do. I'm looking at things through a different lens, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But Tom, let me tell you something that was interesting. And I can't remember if you were one of the ones who told me this, because I interviewed I think about 50 different MSPs. So it was 8 years ago. So it's a little fuzzy, right? But, one of the things that came out in that interview, I call it the understanding spouse characteristic, because I was asking people, how are you able to grow such a successful business? And I wasn't looking for this answer, but what came up again and again is a lot of the people I interviewed said, thank goodness I have a very understanding spouse, because there was a lot of birthday parties I couldn't go to, and vacations I had to work during, or we couldn't buy the new car or buy the new house because I was investing all the money back into the business. And thank God my spouse didn't kick me out of the house, and was understanding and sort of took care of everything for me, and that was something that was kind of surprised me, because that was not something I thought somebody would mention. But, now as I've grown my business, have 2 kids, I mean, it absolutely, that's like a real key thing. So was that one of the things that you had told me back then? Do you remember?
Yeah, I can tell you that. So you and I had talked when I was about 10 years into the business. Mm-hmm. and I can tell you that what you're saying, Robin, is absolutely true. If you think you're going to start from scratch and take something where I mean, because the odds are you're going to have to take everything that you've got and throw it into this pile called a mortgage, and you're going to have to go to work and try to keep it all, right? That's kind of the rules of how things get going. And we still joke about that today. I'll tell you a little bit of a story here in a second, probably. But one of our jokes was, guys, you guys who are working as part of our team, you can do whatever you want. Just don't cost me my house, because that's going to be a little bit of a problem. But yeah, if you don't have a spouse and kids let me say it this way. They have to be supportive, but I got to tell you something. They're not just going to be supportive because you ask them to. They have to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. There has to be an end result that you're really working towards, whether it's a thing, something you can touch or feel or whatever, or it's an experience, or it's something. You've got to be working towards something that everybody can get on board to work towards. Otherwise, it's just a job, and you can get a job anywhere. I mean, there's help wanted signs everywhere right now.
Yeah, really.
If you're going to be an entrepreneur, man, you got to have something. You're something that is bigger than yourself. That's an end result.
Yeah, totally. Well, you know what? Let me do this because we just started talking, and people are piling in here. So let me read a little quick bio about you that I have just real quick, and then we'll have a drink here. But so Tom McDougall founded High Point Networks in 2003 when he was inspired to create an IT business that focused on solving real business needs rather than on reactively answering requests. He started with a team of 4 people in a small office in West Fargo, primarily focusing on network and security solutions for business. And over the last 18 years, High Point Networks has grown to have 10 offices, over 160 employees, more than 3,440 clients, and you're generating over 100 million in revenue. So is that all still true, or any updates?
Well, let's go with that for now. Yes, that's all crazily true. Yes.
Okay. Well, let me do this. Let me say cheers to you. What are you drinking there?
This is a little bit of Weller's, just the regular green label stuff for those of you who are bourbon drinkers. So very good, relatively inexpensive, very smooth. I encourage you to find it.
All right. Well, cheers to that success. I am drinking my go-to Camus here.
Lovely. Very
yeah.
lovely.
I mean, this is like mommy juice. Okay. So, all right. Very cool. All right. Well, so the people listening to this are all in the biz, right? And, Tom, I have in my CRM, I have over 90,000 MSPs, right? Like in my CRM, right? And, I work with a lot of them, growing the business, helping them. And what's really interesting, it's around 72, 76%, somewhere in there, are under $1 million in revenue. And they've been in business for 10 years, 20 years, so talk a little bit about that. So most of the people listening, they're small, they're not 100 million, right? Go back to when you first got started. Like, were you a technician? Were you an entrepreneur that kind of saw, how did you get into this business?
Yeah, I can give you a really good background on that. So I got into the business by accident. Quite frankly, you go back to the 80s when I graduated high school, which for those of you, that would be the 1980s. I had 2 goals in mind. One of them was to never be in sales, and one of them was to never be in technology.
Oh, so well, that worked out.
Oh, that worked out great. So I went to college. I was actually going to be an engineer because they told me I was really good at math. And I grew up in a very small town right on the Canadian border, and I could never figure out how math had anything to do with driving trains. And that didn't really work out as well as I hoped to. So I ended up with a degree in agricultural economics and business. So I thought I was going to be in the agricultural field. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to run my own business. Thought I was going to do something with grain storage or animals or something. And that wasn't working out. And I got married right out of college. I was 22 years old and found out my wife had things in mind that I wasn't really thinking of, like sleeping indoors and driving things and whatever. So I needed a job, right? The only job I could find was at a retail store. It was a Computerland back in those days, selling computers. And I thought it was going to be a short-lived deal. And turned out I was actually pretty good at it. Actually, it turned out I wanted to be good at it. And I'll tell you, probably the number one thing in my entire story happened in 1987 or 8. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I didn't want to be involved with sales ever is because I kept hearing about these things called quotas. Now, for those of you who are in sales and been around sales, you know that quotas are something designed on a spreadsheet to tell you what you should be able to produce, right? And I didn't like that. I didn't like it at all. Well, it turned out that the place where I worked they decided to have this contest. They decided that if you did a certain amount of business, you'd get a weekend in a city. If you did a little bit more than that for the year, you'd get a few days in Las Vegas. And the creme de la creme was, if you did this amount of business, it would happen to be $1 million at that time, you would get a week in Hawaii. Now, I had never, but we didn't go on a honeymoon. We couldn't afford a honeymoon. This week in Hawaii thing was kind of interesting to me, but nobody had ever done $1 million in business individually at this company ever. And I decided, well, you know what, let's try it. And I ended up at about 1.7, and we got our honeymoon. And
wait a minute, 1.7?
Yeah.
Wow. And nobody's ever done that before.
At that time, nobody had ever done $1 million.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, okay, wow. Okay.
So that triggered something for me that said, wait a minute, minds think differently. And if we can put the right minds in the room, we can probably accomplish something really big. Well, it turns out I got recruited from that job, went to work for Motorola for a couple of years as a salesperson, did really well. They wanted to start moving me all over the country. I didn't want to do that. So I ended up working for a small business out of Minneapolis for about 10 years, started a territory for them. The gentleman who owned that business was going to retire. Some things happened, and how we started High Point Networks was I bought everything that I had put together over 10 years. And so we started from scratch in 2003 with 4 people, myself, an accountant my wife and I thought of while we were driving home from dinner one night. My now partner, Justin Fetch, for those of you who might be in the area, you'll know him, and an engineer. And we did not have anything in mind in terms of managed services at the time. We were a project shop. So we started selling projects. And today, when you look at our overall business, we're still a project shop from an overall business perspective. But interestingly enough, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 35 million of our business is recurring in one way or the other. Mm-hmm. But so we started from scratch, and in about 2007, we got in over our head with a project that we knew we could do, but we didn't have the engineering talent to do it. So that's when we really started to grow, because we went out and started hiring people far smarter than we were. And that particular project ended up getting bought by Verizon, not from us, unfortunately, from the company we helped build it. But that put us on the map, and we just started growing from there. And we, instead of trying to jump all over the country, we would just go to like the next city. So for those of you who know geography, we started in Fargo, then we went to Bismarck, then we went to Sioux Falls, then we went to Billings, Montana. And so we just would try to move to the next city where we could reference back to the city. And that's worked out really well for us today, to where we have people all the way from the Canadian border down through Texas, out to the Rocky Mountains, and over to the Mississippi River. And part of the reason is because I personally feel like east of the Mississippi is a little bit of a different culture, and west of the Rockies is almost like a different continent. So we stay in our lane, and we're pretty good at it.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, I mean, so 2003, managed services was just kind of starting to get a foothold. I mean, some people were selling it. Kaseya was just kind of coming on the roadmap there, and gaining some traction. So when you start out, you were a VAR for the most part.
We were a VAR, and we primarily are a VAR today still.
Yeah.
And I remember having this conversation specifically with you, Robin, because you were questioning, whether or not you thought that was really going to be a long-term play. And what we've learned is almost exactly what I remember saying 8 years ago, is that the marketplace has said there's no place for a VAR. You can buy all of this stuff online. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy the stuff cheaper from lots of places than you can get it from us. But what I knew, and what I still believe today, is you cannot buy the stuff and get the talent to understand what it does and how to make it work properly.
Sure.
You have to have somebody to do that. And we've stayed the course with that. And I feel like we're one of the few people, at least in the Midwest, who have really stayed that course.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I
also follow the managed services plan as well.
Yeah, because I think maybe like kind of what was evolving was the days of just, I think there were still a lot of system builders, people that were building hardware. I mean, that was kind of dying out. Yeah, I mean, because back then it was managed services was just kind of coming on the horizon. People were selling block hours more, not like their own kind of managed. They didn't have the remote tools. I mean, they were just kind of getting started. So, but yeah, no, I think what you're saying is, and still today, like Robert Hershevek, the Hershevek group, it's a big, huge MSSP, right? Tom, do you know who they are, Tom? Do you watch Shark Tank?
That name does not ring a bell. And I apologize. I don't mean to be offended. I don't want anybody to be offended. I just don't recognize the name. No,
it's fine. So if you were to watch Shark Tank, there's one of the sharks that's on there. Robert has an MSSP. He's up in his headquarters are in Toronto, but he's through acquisitions and organic growth. He's one of the largest MSSPs in the world, right? Competes with IBM. And I've had him speak at our events multiple times, and he started out same kind of model where VAR model where, and his goal, was cybersecurity. So it was, sell a firewall, but don't just sell a firewall. You sell the installation, the setup, the support, et cetera. And that's even today, that's still largely a huge part of their business, where they go into organizations that have big IT departments and they're just doing these specialized projects. So I don't think that needs going to go away, because even in our client base, we still have a lot of the revenue that comes in from even the smaller MSPs. I'd say a good 20-30% is still projects, where they're installing something, setting it up, co-managed is, where they're doing it for a large organization, has an IT department, but they don't, have the specialization. So,
yep.
Yeah. I mean, so how much of your business is recurring, like the managed services, and how much of it is still the project VAR model?
Well, it all depends on how you really count it, right? So we kind of look at our business today. We've still got the straight up VAR project side, but then we have all of these as a service things, right? So we've got firewall as a service, we've got disaster recovery as a service, backup as a service, blah, 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 this whole menu of different things, right? Plus we have, we have our managed network services, our NOC services, our, SOC service, all those different things. I honestly don't even really know exactly how that all breaks out. I just know that from a recurring revenue perspective, whether it's and it goes anywhere from the maintenance services to the managed maintenance services to all of the other as a service stuff, it's somewhere in the 35 million range.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And a chunk of that is going to be maintenance, but I don't know. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 million is probably just straight out maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So 25 million is probably the true number that you're looking for.
Okay. And do you have any specific niches that is it butcher, baker, candlestick maker? Is there certain niches you play in?
Yeah, there's one of the niches isn't really a product niche at all. It's there are a lot of companies, probably a lot of the ones listening today, who have a model where they want to be like the IT department for small to medium sized businesses. Right. And that's not where we play. We're very clear in our communication with our customers that that's not where we're going to excel. Where we excel is probably what I would call the medium to larger business, where they have an IT department, whether it's only one person or 50, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But we really have found ourselves to be the most successful if the companies we're working with have at least one person who's on the side of the customer. And what I mean by that is they know how Betty does this and how Susie does that and how Bill wants his desktop to look at all those different things, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we excel by helping that person be super successful, and then we take over the heavy lifting. And what that means is we're generally handling the implementation and management of the wired components, the wireless components, the security components, the security training, all of those pieces of it, while the people who are on the staff for the customer are handling the specific CRM, for example, or the specific accounting application or those types of things, because we're not application people. Right. We have found that we just don't have the ability to be very good at the application layer.
Gotcha. Now let's roll back, because when you started, you have 4 people. I mean, did you start right away saying we're only selling to companies that have IT departments and we're sort of that fractional specialist that comes in is that how you started, or did it evolve there? Like talk about that.
Well, when we started, we really didn't have any desire to be, we didn't have any desire to be in a managed services space. We wanted to do a job and leave. Okay. That was how we wanted to operate when we first started. And to answer your question about did we have a target market? Yeah, if they had money and had a heartbeat, that was our target market. Because
wave a dollar, fog a mirror, right?
Exactly, you got it. And then, of course, as you grow, you start to figure out that, okay, that didn't work out very well because of this situation, and that worked really well, and maybe we should do more of that. And, and so as we grew, if you talk to my team, if you talk to my entire managed services team, they'll all tell you the same thing. We never wanted to get involved with the managing of desktop devices. We never have wanted to do that. We still don't, and we're still not very good at it. However, of course, we do help people with patching and those types of things. And the reason why we didn't is because what we saw happening is we saw that being a race to zero. In our market, not saying this happened all over the country, in our market, that was a race to who could do it the cheapest. Because here's what would happen. People would come to us and they'd say, we really want you to do this. And we'd say, all right, well, in order for us to do this, the price will be X dollars. And they'd say, well, your competitor will do it for Y, which is quite a bit less expensive. And we'd say, fine, then go with them. We'll help you where it makes sense. And of course, that didn't make any sense. And then they do that for 6 months and hate what the service they were getting. And they'd come back to us and say, well, we really want you to do it. And we'd say, okay, well, it'll be X. And they'd say, no, we're only paying Y. We want to do it for that. We're like, we already told you we're not doing it for that. So we went through this entire exercise for like 3 years with customers. And when finally we got to the point where we said, look, here's where we're going to be really successful and here's where we're not. So let's go after these the way that we want to. And Mr. Customer, we'd love to help you, but if you want to work with us, here's what you need to provide, and here's what we'll provide. And over the years, we've won a lot of business, and we've got a lot of really good friends who we have a few drinks with, and we don't do business with them.
Right. So, okay. So that, I mean, that's, I think that's probably when you say, you and I talked a couple of years ago, I think that's like that, when you had a strategy and it was so against what everybody else was saying, managed services. And you're like, nope, going this way, a different direction. So I want to talk a little bit about, like, again, a lot of the people listening, they're smaller.
Yep.
They're not at 100 million. How did you talk a little bit about how you got customers back then? Like, there wasn't, and social media wasn't like what it is today. Like, what did you do to get customers? And then maybe talk about what you do today. I mean, today I would think it's easier, but maybe it's not. So talk about that a little bit. Well,
today it's just at a different level. But back when we were pretty small, trying to figure out how to get customers, I'm not going to lie, there isn't really any secret to it. We just stuck to it. I can remember I'll give you an example of a company that probably everybody on the call has heard of. They've now been bought by a larger company, but there was a company that made, in our part of the world, there was a company that manufactured snowmobiles and four-wheelers. They were called Arctic-Cat. And Arctic-Cat is now part of Textron, but Arctic-Cat for years was a company that you wanted to do business with. And they won't mind me saying this because they're great people. Like, we still do business with them, but I literally drove 2.5 hours once a quarter for 2.5 years before I sold them anything. And when I sold them the very first thing, it was a fiber optic transceiver. It was nothing, right? But over the years, we eventually took over pretty much the entire IT component of their business, from a sales and implementation and support perspective. And we did that over and over and over and over. And that's just what it took. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who believe that I can hang this shingle out and people are going to come banging on my door wanting me to do work for them. And maybe that's true in certain areas, but I think from a long-term success perspective, that's not what it is. So that's how we did it, Robin. We didn't have our target list. We had this stack of paper that, I don't know if you can see my fingers. Let's see.
Yeah.
We had this stack of paper that was about 2 inches thick. If you guys remember, there was a company that did IT research back then. It wasn't all online like it is today. You'd buy these reports and you'd get these stacks of paper, and we'd just go through them and we'd be like, yeah, I'd like to work with those guys. And we'd start calling on them, and we'd just lob calls and go visit and bring donuts and buy coffee. And like I said, sometimes we did that for years before we got to do business with them. But today, the number of people who have left us to go do business with somebody else because we took the time to build the relationship side is very, very small. I'll give you one really quick story along those lines as well. We had a casino. It happened to be me. He called me on a Friday afternoon at like 4:45. I remember this. And he said, I want to buy this model of firewall. I said, okay, great, I can do that. Let me ask you a question. And I started asking him questions. And those questions led to, well, I'll tell you what, let me get the right person on the phone with us on Monday morning, where we asked more questions, which led to, well, let's come on site, which led to more questions, which led to us refreshing his entire data center, entire network. And oh, by the way, he did buy a firewall, but he bought the right model.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was all done, I said, Rod, why did you do that? He said, well, I worked with the same company for about 7 years. And every time these types of questions would come up, he'd bring in a person, they'd sit there, and the sales guy'd sit there like he was a hungry dog, kind of panting, while the SE asked questions. And when I called you, in 7 days, you knew more about my business than they did after 7 years. So why would I not do business with you?
Yeah.
And that's how we did this over years. Taking a sidestep, I had a rep one time who lost a very large deal with a bank, and he called me whining and moaning and blah, blah, blah. And I finally just said, stop, let me ask you a question. How many kids does he have? I said, is he even married? And he goes, what does that have to do with this? I said, everything. That's why you lost. Because you wanted a sale, and the guy who won it happened to be a gal who won it, wanted the relationship.
Yeah. You know, Tom, this is like, I cannot tell you how perfect what you're saying right now fits into my week. And it's not because I'm drinking, but, but I have to say this. Okay. So, you know, because we do marketing for a lot of the smaller MSPs, one of the things we'll set up is call tracking. So we know exactly when calls come into their office from like Google, Google pay-per-click or some other campaign we're running, right? And that way we can track. So today, what's cool, which you couldn't do 20 years ago, is we can tell you exactly how many calls are coming in, and I can listen to a call that somebody searched IT services, IT support, Fargo or wherever, and they click and they call the office, and we can listen to that call. And Tom, I cannot tell you how many times somebody will call in and they'll say something to the effect of, I'll give you an actual example. Somebody called in and said, I have 65 workstations and I need them all set up with docking stations. And, we just need them connected to the network. Like, is this something you can help me with? Or another one that came in was, I have a server, I have a server that's giving me some trouble. It's going down, coming back up. Is this something you can help me with? And I have listened to calls where like the person answering the phone will say, sorry, we don't do anything outside of a contract. You have to be an MSP customer. You have to be a managed client for us to take that, and hang up, walk away, or give the number of a competitor. So what I'm hearing you say is, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding this, like when an opportunity comes in, it's not always like, hey, we want to sign $1 million contract with you. It might be just a small project, but you get in there, you understand the situation, you build the relationship, and before you know it, you might. And even if it is a small project, you get in there, you do a great job, you expand that relationship. Again, provided the customer is the right customer and you can do a good job. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
That's exactly what you're hearing from me. And to take that just a half a step further, you want to get the opportunity to prove yourself to that customer. But just as important, you want the opportunity for the customer to prove themselves to you. Now, what do I mean by that? If you're brand new trying to build an MSSP, or an MSP of any kind, you don't want every customer. Trust me. You just don't, because they're and here's the other thing that's really interesting. Somebody who might be the perfect fit for you may not even fit somebody that's considered to be your competitor. And somebody who's the perfect fit for somebody that might think they compete against you might be absolutely not a fit for you. So just, you've got to take this in small steps. The absolute worst thing you can do is take on a very large contract with the wrong customer.
Right. Yeah. Or or give a really cheap price to win the business. And now you're got to like manage that. And every little thing is, you're so thin on your margins. It's like, yeah, we can't do that extra. We can't do that extra, don't, because sometimes like when a project happens with a client, you want to have a little wiggle room. So if you have to do something a little extra, it's not like, sorry, we can't do that, because we got to charge you more, where you're nickel and diming them.
The old adage is, and it's so true, you're far better off it's the best way for me to say this. You are going to be far better off under promising and over delivering.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you something, because this is kind of interesting to me. You obviously are going to compete with other MSPs. Sure. Or other IT shops, right? I mean, it's inevitable. What do you think you do that helps you beat the competition? I mean, you've already alluded to it, but I want to kind of hear from you, like, how do you beat the competition in a head-to-head sales, battle, if you will,
So the company that's closest to us from a headquarters perspective, that believes that they are probably our biggest competitor. I'm not sure that that's true. Mm-hmm. Their regional director is a very good friend of mine. And he actually asked me that question one time. And he said, look, I know how to beat these guys. I know how to beat these guys. And I've never beaten you. Why? And I said, dude, I can tell you, but you're not going to believe me. And he said, no, I really want to know. I said, we kind of went back and forth on that. I said, look, here's the real answer is this. When we go into a customer, our goal is never at the first day to try to figure out how to sell them something. It's try to figure out, our goal is to figure out, what are you trying to accomplish? Not just today, but where are you trying to go with this? And how do we help you get there? Where you're focused on what's your problem and how do we fix it, right? And when you're focused on what's your problem and how do we fix it, everybody knows that what that means is, how much money can you suck out of me? When we're in there, we don't even talk about money. We're talking about, where do you really want to go? And he's like, that is crap. There's no way that that's what it is. And I said, dude, that's all it is. You've got the same technology, the same people, the same pricing, the same product that we have. But everybody knows that when you go in there, it's a matter of, how do I suck as much money out of the customer as possible? That's just the way you act. Everybody knows it. Mm-hmm. And that's the big difference. We don't talk about money. We talk about results.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, I think this is we're doing a sales training with a current MSP, some MSPs, and everybody, everybody gets very hung up on the pricing, the quote, asking technical questions. I think that's where a lot of them go. Like, they get in a sales opportunity, they start saying, well, how many servers do you have? How many workstations? And because they're doing the math in their head to think about, like, I'm going to calculate a price and give you a price. Right. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is, take a step back and say, tell me about your business. Tell me about, like, how do you guys generate sales? Like, what tech do how do you use technology to actually serve your customers? And where are the bottlenecks in workflow? Where are the frustrations your service delivery team has? Am I understanding? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Those are all questions that we ask. Right. But everybody talks about wanting to get to the C-level to try to, I don't know what they do at the C-level. I know what we do at the C-level, because we're asking those questions about, tell me what this business looks like 5 years from now. What does keep you awake as a CIO? How do we help your people be more successful? How do we help you capitalize on what you've spent from an IT perspective today? What's the right thing to do? Do you need more people? Is it that you need more skill set? How do we play in that? From a product perspective, we'll figure that out later, but let's figure out how it is that we can help you capitalize on what you have today. We've had many times when we've gone into a new customer, not even sold them anything. We've just helped them figure out how to actually use what they have, whether it's their human capital or their IT, whatever they have for IT components. We spend a lot of time helping them figure out how to use those things better. And that creates way better juju than, we got to get rid of all this stuff so we can put something in that we know how to manage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, how many salespeople do you have now?
About 35.
Woo. Okay. Hold on. I need a drink. Cause like managing 35, do you manage them?
I do not. I've got two other guys who manage those folks for me.
What do you think about managing salespeople? What, let me ask you this. Who's harder to manage, salespeople or technicians?
Yes.
People.
They're two totally different animals.
They are. Yeah.
A really good account manager is like herding cats.
Okay.
They just are. They're generally ADHD type personalities. They're chasing their native personality is to chase the shiny thing. So you've got to kind of get them to simmer down and focus. And there's no way that we've got account managers who think they can handle 200 accounts. It's like, no, you can handle 6. The other 200, you just don't want. You want to get the revenue off of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, so let's figure this out. So account managers and salespeople in general, the good ones they're a challenge to manage because they're generally chasing stuff, right? And they're all over the place, and that's good. You just have to figure out how to keep them in their bounds. Engineering side is totally the opposite, right? They want to focus on one thing and stay on that one thing until it's done, which they should. But sometimes there's the phone call that comes in that says, "Hey, I'm down and I need help." And so you got to kind of get them to think a little bit outside their box in terms of, how do I figure out what's most important right now? Mm-hmm. And if something does come up that's more important, how do I effectively tell that person I was working with, look, I've got a really bad down situation that I actually need to take care of. Can we put this on hold for a little bit and understand if it's possible to do that before you even ask? So it's totally different. I mean, engineering minds are phenomenal. They do amazing work. I wouldn't want to do it. I thank God that we've got about 85 of them that are awesome. Mm-hmm. Account managers, I love to death. They drive me insane sometimes, but you just got to put the right personality in the right place.
Yeah. Well, so the reason I want to ask you, is, I think you're a natural salesperson. You talk about selling technology and you have high emotional intelligence around people. And so as you go back to when you started, right? Talk about, how did you grow that sales department? Because this is an area I think a lot of small business owners struggle with, which is they can kind of sell, or they know how to sell, and then they've got to replicate themselves because they can't sell everything. So talk about a little bit, if you had to go back and advise yourself and you were just starting out growing a sales team, knowing what you know now, what advice would you have for people that are watching this?
So what we did, and what we still do today with somebody that we bring on that has 0 sales experience but wants to learn it, and how we did it in 2003 was, I actually had somehow figured out how to be a little bit successful in sales. Not really sure how that happened, but the guy who is now our VP of sales, I had hired him, and he had no sales experience, but he was an ADHD guy. That's why I hired him, because he was screwing up what is now Amazon's network in North Dakota. About every day, he'd call me and say, this is what I did. How do I fix it? And I finally called him one day and said, look, we need to talk, because I think I want to hire you. And anyway, what we did for about 6 months, and we were working out of my home at the time because we didn't have an office. He sat at a card table at the end of my desk and just listened to every call I made. And he learned that way. And then he started doing some of his own, and I would just encourage him in the things that he was doing really well, and try and help him in the things that maybe weren't going quite as well, and answer questions and just be available for him. And we do that today, maybe not with the card table, but everything else about what I just said, we still do today with our new account managers who want that kind of help. We start them in a little bit more of what we would call a business development role, where it's almost like a dialing for dollars type of thing.
Yeah, setting appointments, looking for opportunities. Right. Okay.
Yeah. And I tell them, look, if you make 5 phone calls and you're not getting the results you're looking for, stop, because I don't want you making another 5 and screwing 5 more customers up. Come and talk to me. Let's figure out, or go talk to your supervisor, whatever. Let's figure out what's going on, and let's do it again. And we just, and you've got to be able to persevere. And the people who can do phenomenally well in our business.
what do you look for in a good salesperson? Like, how do you, like when you're interviewing, like you're probably not interviewing people today
Well,
because you,
I
but
am.
like how, like if you were interviewing a salesperson, is there a question you can ask that's just like right away? I know this, I mean, I know that's a silly question to ask. Like, what's the one thing, right? But like, what do you look for in a good salesperson?
It's not so much a magic question, Robin, that I look
Mhm.
for. I personally ask a series of questions. Here's the way I put it. If I end up in an interview, this is what I tell them, whether it's an engineer, a manager, or an account manager. And I usually am in on the final interview for an account manager still.
Okay.
What I'll tell them is, look, if you're this far, I'm going to assume you can do the job. Now I want to know about you.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the real thing that tells me whether or not I feel like they're going to fit is the question about it. And it depends on how the interview is going. But at the end of the day, the question is, tell me what success looks like for you. And what I'm looking for there is, am I getting a superficial answer or am I getting something that's meaningful? And here's why that's important. Because think about this for a second. Let's say that you told me that your goal in life is to have a Ferrari. And I asked you this question, Robin, if something happened and you never got that Ferrari and you're 75 years old and you're sitting there on a beach someplace with a drink in your hand, are you going to spend any time thinking about the fact that you never got that Ferrari? So most of the time, that's a superficial response. Now, let me give you a different example. Somebody says, you know what, I really want to put my kids into a private school. Okay. Generally, that's going to give a different response if you're sitting there at 75 years old thinking about, was I ever able to give my kids the education they wanted, than whether or not they got the Ferrari. So I'm looking more for what's meaningful to that person. And secondarily, will they fit on a team? Can they relate to what we're talking about? We're in the Midwest, and specifically in our shop, a lot of us are hunters and fishermen, and we do a lot of outdoor activities and that kind of thing. And I want to know, are they going to fit on the team, right? So if somebody's a homebody and doing completely different things, I don't mean to take anything away from those things, but maybe that's going to be a little more challenged to fit on the team, right? So that's the types of things I'm looking for. Do they fit on the bus, and what's meaningful to them? Because I would rather spend my time helping somebody accomplish what they want to do with their life than try to force them to help me be successful.
Right. Now, when you're interviewing, I'm sure you have people on your team who are young, right? I mean, for us, the SDR, the BDR, business development rep, there's a lot of young ones. They're kind of up and coming, and they might have I want to get a Ferrari. You know what I mean? They might like something a little superficial. Do you discount that and say, nah, they're not the right, or do you kind of take it in consideration with age? I mean, like if, you're interviewing somebody and they're 60 years old and they're going, I want a Ferrari. I don't know. Maybe that is, I mean, do you ever take that in context a little bit?
I absolutely do, because, that what the things I'm giving you are generalizations, right? So we've actually got a gentleman who is 24, applying for, he was in a BDR role for us, actually an inside sales role. He wants to move into a account manager role. And that's kind of his personality.
Yeah.
Well, and so what we've talked about is, I can help you get the Ferrari. And it's not a Ferrari, but I can help you get the Ferrari. Here's what you're going to need to do. Here's the steps you're going to have to take. But I am all in helping you get the Ferrari. And you know what, if they run from that because of all the steps and work they have to do, it's not the right person. But if they're like, dude, if you're serious, I'm in, then let's roll. I love having a Ferrari in my parking lot.
Yeah, who doesn't, right? So let me ask you this. So like on salespeople, tell me about a really horrible hire you made. I'm like, because I'm drinking a little bit, I want to be funny now. Like, I kind of want to know, like we're all being serious. Like, what's the question you asked for an interview? Like, what's the funniest interview you've ever had? Does something must spring to mind? I mean, come on, I can tell you one.
I don't know that I can think of a really horrible interview, but I can think of, and this guy is a great guy. but we had hired somebody who had a lot, like 15 years of experience with and it wasn't CDW, so I'm not dissing anybody when I say it, but kind of more in that kind of like a large nationwide deal, right? And we thought that we could kind of teach him to take what he knew, he happened to be a guy, and turn it into something successful. And he could never get away from the, oh, you don't have any projects? Okay, I'm never calling you again. That mentality, it's like you would only want to talk to people if there was an active project on the table right now. And it was like, there's no way you're going to be successful with that. And we had to let that person go. We've not had horrible hiring.
Really? I don't believe
just
that.
have not. I mean, I can't.
You must have an amazing heart, because like I got some really crazy people I've hired, not like a ton of them, but like they creep in and they do just crazy stuff. I mean, are you serious? Like you've not had any?
Well, I inherited one who decided that it would be a really good idea to try and hit on somebody at a bank by leaving a note there with them. That
like a customer?
Oh yeah, that customer. That didn't last long.
That's pretty tame. I think your whole. I think you got some.
Speaking at Black Hat one year that decided to be 100% drunk on the airplane on the way to Black Hat before he spoke. That didn't work out very well. But no, we haven't had. I can't think of any. I honestly can't think of any horror stories or even any super funny ones. I mean.
Yeah, I feel like I don't even want to share mine because it's like I'm a train wreck over here or something.
I
don't know.
I'm like, Mike, Robin, where are you finding your people here? Maybe we just got to talk to Tom about how to find people. So
I need to move to Fargo. That's what I think. That's it. I think it's just something. Maybe they're cooler out there or something. Yeah, it's just crazy stuff. Crazy town.
I don't know. I am thankful that I don't have any of those. I do have. There's some things that we've done that we probably should have done differently, which I probably shouldn't talk about. But I mean, so it hasn't all been, fun and roses. But
yeah.
I mean, Tom, just on that vein, I mean, you've obviously done phenomenally well. You're incredibly successful. But I mean, through the years, if you were starting up again today, there's got to be some things you would do differently. Do you have any of those that come to mind?
Honestly, Mike, from the building of the business perspective, I don't have any regrets. I don't. I would do some things from an acquisition perspective differently. But I don't have a single person on my team right now that I don't want on my team. I don't think there's very few people on our team that maybe don't want to be on our team. Here's the thing. Somehow, somewhere along the line, I got it in my head that the absolute most important thing that High Point Networks has is their people. So we take very great care. We hire very slowly. We've had to fire very few. We have had to fire some, but we've had to fire very few, and people just don't leave us. And the reason why that is not because we pay them over the top. We pay competitively, fairly. We do well with our pay. We give people the time they need to do the things they need to do. But most important, when you look at the hierarchy of what's important to Tom McDougall and High Point Networks, the number one thing that's important to us is our people. Now, our customers are next on the list, but having to choose between a customer and one of my people, unless there's something illegal that went on or something crazy that one of our people did, which has never happened, I'm going to choose our people. And I've done it multiple times, and my people know that. And when you treat people with that kind of respect and they're not going anywhere and people clamor to come to you. So when it comes time for us to hire new people, which we're in the process of doing again right now, that word gets out there and we end up being blessed with getting some of the best people on the planet, and we keep them and we treat them like they're the best people on the planet. And maybe sometimes they aren't when they come to us, but they sure are once they get there. And that's how we treat them. And so it goes in our business, it goes our people, our customers, and somewhere down here, someplace is profits. And because we do it that way, we've never had to worry about profits. We've grown almost every year of our existence. But it's because we don't worry so much about that. We don't manage by spreadsheet. We're not a public company. I would never be a public company. As a matter of fact, I can do an entire conversation on that. Put people first, man. It is the most important thing. When people say, well, the customer is always right. The customer might be right, but if you have to choose between your people and your customer, choose your people.
Yeah, no, amen to that. Amen to that. Now, you, in the opening, you said something about a funny story about, I was telling you about the understanding spouse, and you kind of said something like, hey, I got a funny story. Do you remember what that was? Do you want to share that with us?
I do, actually. It goes back to and it actually came out in our Christmas party this year, but it goes back to the whole story about you can do whatever you want as long as you don't lose Tom's house. Well, here's a story on that. So in 2003, we were living in this, it was a reasonably decent house, but I had bought some land that eventually we were going to build what my wife and I, my wife's name is Chris, what Chris and I, we had been planning on doing this for like 10 or 15 years. We just didn't have the money. Kind of back to that whole story I was telling you about what's important to you down the road. And what was important to us is that we would be able to move out into the country, have some acreage, and build this house that we had had a picture of on our refrigerator for like 10 years. And we finally got to the point where we could do that. And that was, we did that in about 2008. And so we had our house. So the story, the laugh was always just do whatever you want. Just don't lose Tom's house, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you're familiar with the Fargo, North Dakota geography, you know that we've had some flooding. And what's called the Fargo-Moorhead Diversion Authority decided that they were going to build a diversion for the Red River around the city of Fargo. And guess what? Their half-a-mile wide diversion went right smack dab through our property. So this spring, there are multiple videos and pictures of my house going down the road because we ended up selling it at an auction in order to be part of the, eminent domain thing. So another family ended up getting our house. So ultimately, in all of the jokes and all of the stories that we have, Tom finally did lose his house. What? The good news is we built another one after living in a shed for 9 months, but we did end up in another house. But that was the joke at this year's Christmas party, is that we did manage to lose Tom's house.
Oh man, that's terrible. So you lost it to eminent domain?
Yeah, we did.
Oh my God. I that is something that makes me nuts. I just, the fact that our government can do that is, you know what I mean? It's just crazy. So
imagine, a professional couple who does like to travel and, goes to the lake and does different things, whatever, but coming home from their winter in South Texas, which is where I am right now, which last year we spent as much time as we could here because we didn't have a house, but coming home, expecting to be able to move into something livable and finding that all you have in essence is a garage. And oh, by the way, because of COVID and supply chain and everything else, you have to live there till the end of October. And try doing that with a wife and kid. Well, actually my kids are older. They're not in the house anymore, but just try doing that with just your spouse sometime, living out of a garage with no kitchen. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, someone would end up on a milk carton. It wouldn't be me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. What about your kids? Do they have any interest in taking over the business? Are they involved in the business?
Yeah, they are actually. So kind of the rules were for my kids were to have two girls. One of them, Megan, 31. She's an account manager today. The other one is Morgan. She's 25. She handles most of our renewals today. So she's kind of she's more of a numbers person and a detail person. She's kind of like an engineer, if you will. And the other one is more like me in that, but the rules were they couldn't come and work for us right away. They had to go do something else for a couple of years because they've already learned everything they could learn from me. So one of them went and worked as an executive assistant to the president of a bank for a couple of years. And the other one worked at, that was the older one, Megan, and the younger one worked for a company that processed HSA stuff, just kind of the banking side of that. And both of them, after a year and a half or 2 years, decided that, you know what, we actually do want to come and work for you. So they've been both on our team. Megan's been there for 7 or 8 years, and Morgan's been there for about 3, and they're excelling. They're doing wonderfully well. And long term, the plan is that they will, when Papa's no longer around, they will continue the High Point Networks business, and we have some plans in place to make that happen.
So how do you deal with that with your employees? They're like, oh, that's the boss's kid, you know, they get, I mean, are you tougher on them, or are you like, how do you deal with that?
So I never put myself in a position to manage either one of them. I let other people manage them both. And there was that a little bit. And I'm proud to say that both of them, without any prodding from me or anybody else, I have heard multiple stories from multiple people throughout the company, from the biggest of the big shot to the littlest of the, brand new person, that have told me, look, your girls, one of my big shot sales guys was like, when she came in, we thought this is going to be like daddy's going to hand her everything and blah, blah, blah. And, honestly, they said after about 3 months, she was kicking our ass.
Cool.
And she did it all on her own, and they're 100% on board with what's going on there.
Very cool.
So Tom, did you have any pep talks with them before they started?
I did. And I was really part of that. That was part of the conversation. Is like, look, I'm not going to bail you out. You've got to do this on your own. I mean, you might think you have a fallback, and from a dad perspective, you do, but from a business perspective, you gotta pull your own weight here.
Exactly.
And certainly we have the opportunity to have some different types of conversations than I would with, just somebody across the hall. But yeah, that was really the pep talk was you gotta pull your own weight here.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, looking back, I mean, obviously huge success in your life and everything. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of my family. The girls, my wife, our ability to just have a life and do the things that, we spent about 20 years not doing much of anything, with the hope, anticipation, and dream that we would be able to spend our later years doing kind of whatever we wanted. And that's worked out for us in that way. I'm very, very proud of the status of our business in our communities. We're very philanthropic. People know that. We participate in lots of different things from a community perspective. I personally have done a couple of things that I'm super proud of from a board level perspective. One of them is an all abilities gym that we started from scratch, and I helped build to something that's actually one of only 2 in the country at this point.
Now, what is that again? It's a what gym?
It's called an all abilities gym. And what that means is they have a very competitive gymnastics component to it, but the biggest part of it is a special needs component where children of all abilities are able to come to the gym. They have specialized training, and one of the things, and I don't want to go into an advertisement for this, but it's kind of proven that when you have children with special needs, certainly they can get special needs education at public schools and those types of things from an educational perspective, but very rarely do you find anything that actually gets them any kind of movement, whether it's simply jumping on a trampoline or a climbing wall or anything movement wise. They don't have physical education of any kind. We provide that for not only Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, but kind of an area around Fargo. We provide that for those schools. And that's actually really, really cool. And we've taken that on the road. We're helping some of the schools create their own programs. That's awesome. And the other one was, and this sort of happened by accident, it's one of my favorite stories actually, is there's a lot of people out there who they come to the workforce with a background. And everybody has a background. I get that. But some people have a criminal background. Whether it's deserved or not, they have felony records, those types of things. And we had a gentleman come to us looking for a business development role. And he was very, very honest and said, he told us what was going on. And I thought about that. And there were some things that we have for roles that just wouldn't fit, but where we thought he would fit very well, that didn't really have any effect on that. So I did a little research on the background, that kind of thing. And when it came right down to it, when he came in for a second interview, everybody was sitting around the table and he was sitting there, and I walked in and I had 2 manila folders in my hand, and one of them was about 1 inch thick and one of them just had a piece of paper in it. And I said to him, I said, Adam, here's the deal. I said, you've got 2 choices. In this hand, I've got everything that I can research on your background, and it's not good, but it's in your past. In this hand, I have a job offer. The question I have for you is, which one's more important? The stuff that's in the past or your future? He ended up working for us for about 5 years, and then he ended up starting his own nonprofit to help other people through that same process. And it's an incredibly good story. And those are the things that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I think one of the best benefits of being successful in business is it gives you the means to make an impact in the world. We can all make an impact. Look, you can volunteer your time, you can do things to help people. Absolutely. But when you have a business and you have the means to give a job to somebody who wouldn't otherwise have a job, or donate money in a significant way to certain causes, I think that's one of the coolest things about being successful in business. And I think if you're struggling, like a quote I say all the time is, you can't fix the world with broken hands, right? If you're barely making it yourself, it's not impossible, but it's hard to kind of help other people because you're barely making it, right? And I think, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? I think that's part of one of the coolest things about achieving success.
Well, I've said it. I don't know. I've come up with all kinds of stuff that I've read or heard or made up or whatever, but Rob, and I agree with that 100%. And I think that part of it kind of comes from, I think we all go through phases. And I think kind of the first phase we go through when we first get out of school, however far we went, we get into our first job, is we're trying to figure out, how do we make enough money to survive? Right? We all do that. We've all been through that. And then I think we kind of graduate to, okay, I can survive now. Now, how do I save money so I can do something down the road, whether it's get a different car or a different house or whatever? How do I not just make some money, but how do I save some money? And then, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of stop. And I think that what you just said is probably one of the most important things that a lot of people don't really understand. Is I think there's another phase, and it's like, how do I give more? Mm-hmm. What do I have to do in order to be able to give more? Because whether it's a religious thing or just a personal thing, or it just makes you feel good or whatever, I think everybody feels better if you're able to give something back. And Chris and I, we kind of went through those phases as well, and we got to the point where the $100,000 a year isn't that much these days, but back in our younger days, $100,000 was a lot. And we're like, what do we got to do to make $100,000? How do we make $100,000? And then it was like, okay, well, now how do we save some of that so we can do something with it? And eventually our mind went to, how can we give that much? What do we have to do in order to be able to give that much? And for us, and this is just our story, it doesn't have to be everybody's story, and it might not be anybody's that's listening, but for us, the story is that the more we've thought like that, the more we've been blessed with. And when you get to the point in your life where you can give freely without feeling like it's a burden just because you feel like it, and you find causes that need help, that's a completely different stage. And I would love to see everybody listening on this call to get to that point, because I believe that we could make such a major impact on so many things, but we just have to think in a different way and get to that point.
Yeah. I just wrote down, like, make, save, and give. If you have a goal, like, how do you make $1 million? And then the next, like, how do you save $1 million? And then the next one is, how do you give $1 million? If you can, I think that really there's, as we grow as people, as entrepreneurs, if first we're like, it's the same thing in a business, you're just trying to make it. You're just trying to like, how do I pay the bills and service customers and just kind of maybe make a little profit. And then you hit a second stride, which is where you are successful. And now you're trying to manage just the responsibility of it all. You got clients depending on you, you have employees depending on you. It's like a different, and then how do you get beyond that to even to where your organization can really have an impact, and I mean, we all make an impact, even small businesses, but where you can give beyond yourself. And I think that's where you see big corporations. I mean, they do a lot of charitable things. So, and I agree with you. I think there's a lot of things that give you joy in life, but there's nothing, I just, if you're watching this and you've never been able to, like, if you've never given yourself the present of making an impact on somebody in a significant way, it's a shame. I think more people should feel that, should experience that. And unfortunately, I know a lot of people are in the struggle and they're just trying to, make it for their family. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying, look, I got to put my family first. I got to make sure that I'm not struggling, that I'm not, you got to be responsible. But I think you're right that the striving is going beyond that, like beyond just getting comfortable yourself and then pushing yourself to how can I give even more? How do I build something that gives to the community and makes an impact on people's lives? Because that's when it gets very, very cool.
There was I wish that I could say this was mine, and I don't use it because it's not mine. A friend of mine came up with this years ago, but he kind of created this motto for him and his family, and him and his team, actually, him and his business team, where their motto was, we're going to have fun, we're going to make money, and we're going to make a difference. And to me, that epitomized about everything that we're talking about right now. We got to have fun. If you're not having fun, there ain't any sense doing it. Go find something else.
Right.
You got to make money. I mean, you got to make money and you got to save money. If you're running a business, guys and gals, you got to make money and you got to save money. If you're not making money, you figure out how to do that. And if you're not saving money, think about what's going to happen if you have a bad quarter. That's what I tell our team. They're like, well, how come we don't pay out bigger bonuses or whatever? It's like, well, that I could, but if we have a bad first quarter, how many of you want to not be here? Because I won't be able to pay you. I mean, would you rather me to have some money in the bank to pay you, or what's the deal here? And then, so have fun, make money, but really it's all about making a difference. Whether it's in the people you're working with, whether it's in the customers you're working with, or whether it's in your community, make a difference.
Yeah. Amen. Hey, Mike, are there any, I haven't really been looking at questions and stuff. Is there anything that I've missed or I should ask before we let Tom get back to his being awesome?
So we covered a lot of the stuff with the questions you were asking along the way. I was talking about starting up. We had some questions about salespeople and texts that were dropped in there. So I'm going to do one last check to see if there's anything else from there, but
yeah, Tom, while he's doing that, I mean, we'll go back to like more serious things. Like the MSP, I think the IT services industry it just evolves and changes so rapidly. I mean, where do you think the big opportunities are in the next couple of years for anyone, whether MSP, VAR, however your model, where do you think the big opportunities are?
So, well, right now, because it's the supply chain, I think the opportunities are in what a lot of us are doing, and that's just helping manage what customers have, right? It's, I'm in a situation where I'm going to have to deal with things that are maybe 3, 4, 5 years old. I just got to deal with it. Help me through that, right? So our job as managed service providers isn't always to sell them new stuff. Sometimes it's just to help them limp through with what they have until they can get something new, and that's just the way it is. We have that going on, but I see long-term, the way that I describe it to our team is, I see that, we have another customer in our world, and I'll just tell you who it is. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to get in there anyway, but it's called American Crystal Sugar. And it doesn't really mean anything other than when I think about, when I describe to customers how it is that we'd like to see, how we see this going forward, it's like, American Crystal Sugar has several IT people on their staff. wouldn't it be nice if the IT people on their staff were focused on the production of sugar, the production and manufacturing of sugar, and they use somebody like our team to help them with the actual IT stuff, the under the cover stuff, the how do I get data to move from here to there? How do I do it securely? How do I make sure things are connected? Blah, blah, blah. Wouldn't it be nice if we had IT staffs that were focused on the business, and then we partnered with people who could actually focus on IT? And that's where I actually think the business is going. Overall, I think that from small to large, human capital, I mean, think about our world today. It's virtually impossible for anybody other than the largest of the large customers to hire enough IT staff to handle just something as simple as endpoint control. I mean, they can't do it. I mean, end user training and tools like KnowBe4 or Mimecast or those, there's not enough people. That's our job. That's our job to help them stay secure from that perspective. I mean, you've got the largest of the large businesses that can't even figure out how to actually navigate a cybersecurity policy these days. They're just getting too complex. Yeah. And that's where companies like ours, from the smallest of the small to the largest of the large, can come in. And by the way, if you're a company that's doing $1 million a year in business and it's profitable, you don't need to aspire to do 100 million. There's no reason why you have to do that. We did that because we were in demand, and that's just it got out of hand is how that happened, to be completely honest with you. But there's room in the market for all sizes of business, because there are all sizes and all colors and sizes of end users. And figure out where you want to go and set your business up in order to help you get there. And if it's $1 million a year, that's an incredibly good accomplishment for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen.
So Robin, we do have one question, and he's on early. He got up early in Australia to ask this, so figure we'll get it from Aaron here. He's asked you, Tom, when you first started out, what was one of your keys to success, like to get to that next level?
Don't hire weird salespeople like I do. That's my problem. I keep hiring like these crazy people or something.
There is something to be said for that, but
see, I'm like, he's like, totally.
So for me personally, for Tom McDougall personally, it was to understand early on that I was trying to build a business that was bigger than me. And what that meant was I needed to be comfortable in the fact that people I was going to hire would be smarter than me. And that was a decision I made very like on day number one. Other people that I see in the business that are in my position are oftentimes hiring people they feel like they can control and tell them what to do, and they're always smarter than them. And I knew that we'd never get anywhere if we had to rely on my brain alone. It just wasn't going to work.
Mm. That, I agree with that 100%. You gotta, I think that's a big, it's a big bottleneck. I mean, Jack Welch is one of the people I respect the most. If you run a read about leadership, I don't know how you feel about Jack Welch, Tom, but I love his material. And, he always said that the HR director is probably the most important person in an organization, where they're recruiting the talent to grow an organization, where you're not, I think you mentioned something about a golf game, you want to be playing football instead of a golf game, it may have been you, maybe someone I talked to earlier. I don't know. I've had a couple of drinks now. So anyway, but when you're running a business, I think you're right. I think it's the person who can recruit and keep the best talent is going to win, because ultimately, a question that, and I think it was a Jack Welch question. I don't know who to give his credit for, but if you would imagine if everybody on your team was an A player in sales, in marketing, in operations, in accounting and finance, and if everybody was an A player, how many of your current problems would go away? And when you ask an entrepreneur that, the first thing they think is like, well, all my problems would go away, right? You know, because I'd have this amazing team that would solve everything. And I think to just put an underscore under what you're saying, I think it is important for, like, I think that's, for me as an entrepreneur, that's been my evolution, because when I started my business, I didn't want employees. I hated employees. And it was just because I didn't know how to hire and manage people, lead people. I mean, it was all me, right? And I think that's the evolution that you get to, is you start to realize that, I mean, and tell me if you agree, disagree, that I think running a business is, to really succeed, it's about building a team that works together to create something amazing.
Yeah, so just to let me finish up with one more thought from the question. So I know that might have been a little bit more of a fluffy answer than what you were looking for. The kind of the real answer when we very first got started is never quit. You know, we just never quit. I mean, we stayed on it. We if we got told no, I mean, I joke about this, and I apologize to the different people that might be on this call who get offended by this particular thing. But I mean, we got told no all of the time, and I just tell them, you know, you're married, right? I mean, has your spouse ever said no? You're still married, so then move on, right? I mean,
Right.
you just got to do it, right?
Try again tomorrow. Might be a better day, you
Yeah.
know, maybe she's drinking, who knows, you know?
Well, you took it
Might
that
get
direction,
lucky.
which is my direction as well. But on the other side, though, you know, we talk about this A player thing, right? And I agree with you. You got to have A players, but there's kind of a difference between A players and like cocky A players, right? So think about some of the teams that we've all watched over the years. So I remember, I could give you college examples, but you might not recognize them because they're not the big Division I, they're the little Division ones that I can think of. But I remember a couple of baseball teams, Major League Baseball teams, who over the years have tried to build these teams of absolute super studs, right? These bigger than life super studs. And I remember that Kansas City had done that one time, and Detroit had done that one time, and neither one of them got to the World Series. And the reason why is because a team is not made up of a crap ton of super stud individuals. Doesn't necessarily make the best team. If you know what, if that makes sense. You have to have some, but they've also got to be really good team members, which is why when Robin asked about the interview process, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure what answer she was looking for, but for me, I want to know, do they fit on the team? That's my most important thing. Do they fit on the team? Do they have something to desire? Is there something I can help them accomplish? Those are the things that I'm looking for. You know, and from the perspective of, you know, we kind of live by 5 things in our company, and really they're really pretty simple. One of them, and I'll just tell you, well, I won't even get into those 5. Let me get into the 3 that are the most important. The 3 things that we live by that make us different from everybody else that we work with. And I'll tell this to you, the biggest of the big CEOs, if I sit in their room for the first time, because they always ask the question, right? Why should we do business with you? And of course, they're, you know, everybody's expecting, the inexperienced are going to answer with things like, because we have the best products, the best people, the best, you know, blah, whatever. And you know what? Everybody those are table stakes. Everybody who's has sat in that room has had those things. That's not the question. The question is, what makes you different? And in our case, I'll open our kimono and tell you what makes us different. And it's 3 things. The first one is something we call our safety principle. And the safety principle was developed because we watched a lot of companies. It's not an OSHA thing. We watched a lot of companies grow and die because they got to the point where they were big enough to where people wanted to move from a position where they were to the next position. And the only way to do that was to stab somebody in the back to get to the next level. So you created this culture of everybody had to watch their back. And we've watched companies do it. We've watched companies fail. And that is you will be fired on the spot if that happens at High Point Networks. So that's the first one. That's our safety principle. The second one is something we call our refrigerator friends principle. And that gets a little bit weird, but I'll tell you what the concept is. There's 2 types of people that'll come to your home. There's the type of people who they ring the doorbell, they take their shoes off, you usher them into the living room, you sip tea or wine or whatever, you usher them back out. And then there's the other group of people that come to your home, they don't even knock, they just go to the fridge, grab something and sit down and want to talk. That is who we are as a person. And at this point, the CEO is always looking at me going, what in the hell does that have to do with anything? And I joke about it and I say, I know that's what you're thinking, and you're right, but hold on. Because the third thing is something we call our fire hose principle. And the fire hose principle works like this. Literally everybody on my team doing something for you or everybody else is at some point going to find themselves on fire. Something's going to have gone wrong. We're going to forgot to ask a question. You're going to have forgot that the person who has the information is in the other cube, whatever. Something's going to go wrong. The question is not whether it will go wrong, because I'm here to tell you it will. The question is, how do you handle it? And in our world, the question is, do you stand around and watch them burn, or do you go get a fire hose and help put the fire out? And we are the fire hose company. And there's no way that I can prove this to you until you can experience it. My goal with this meeting is that you get a chance to experience it. And that is our elevator pitch and how we have built our business from nothing to where we are today.
I love it. I love it. That's like that. That's pure gold right there, Tom. Honestly, that's phenomenal. I'm like taking notes. That's why I'm looking down. I'm not like doing something else. I'm not drawing a pony or anything. I'm like actually taking notes. This is what happens when you drink and you haven't had anything to eat since like 8 a.m. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of, it gets, but no, that, I mean, honestly, that is great. That is phenomenal. I think, I mean, wow, this has been great. So I want to be respectful of your time, because we're like way over the hour, and you've been super generous with your time. And I know you've said a couple of times, like, that it's not what I'm looking for in an interview, but what I'm looking for in an interview is truth, because, I interview on our stage, we have a lot of very successful people come on our stage. And there's a lot of times, Tom, when I'm talking to somebody, and I think that they're thinking what you just said, what does she want me to say? Right. And they kind of filter, or here's what I think the audience should hear, or here's the persona I want to put out there. So I'm not going to tell them the truth. I'm going to give this stock standard, clean, cleansed, politically correct, whatever. You know what I mean? Like people, like when you interview people, they don't always
screwed all of that up. Sorry.
No, but so what I'm saying is, like, I just want to make sure I really want to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, your thoughts, because clearly you're doing something right. I mean, look, how many businesses actually get to 100 million in revenue? I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a fraction of a percent, right? So you're clearly doing something wrong. So, I look at it from the standpoint, if you're saying something that doesn't agree or align with what I think, that's a sign for me to maybe I ought to go back and rethink what I was thinking. Maybe I got something wrong here, because, we can't know it all. And I think that the surrounding ourselves with people who agree with us, it feels good, but it's not good for growth. So right. Yeah, I appreciate your candor and, you sharing your time with us. Mike, I don't know, any other final things? Am I overlooking anything before we let Tom get back to his weekend?
No, I thought this has been awesome because of what you just said, that it's not the stock answers. And I mean, Tom, just want to congratulate you on your family and your activities outside of business and everything. Like, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
All right.
I appreciate you welcoming me on.
Very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, cheers to you, Tom.
Cheers to you, Tom.
Cheers. Oh, one sip left.
One sip left. I got a whole bottle I got to get through here.
Oh, geez.
This is dinner. Once you get to a certain point. what is that? Okay. What do you
there he goes.
There it is. All right. Nice.
Weller green label.
So if anybody wants to butter up Tom, we know what to buy him now, because that's what he,
Hey, there's even nicer ones than the green label, as Tom will tell you. So
yes.
yeah. If you really want to butter them up.
I'll take
if somebody wanted to butter you up, Tom, what would they get you?
If you really wanted to butter me up, you would find me a bottle of William Weller LaRue.
What was that again?
It's William Weller LaRue. So
Okay.
it's the same family as this one, but it's actually the family reserve version. And it's incredible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, there you go. It's out there now. I'll have to bring you into, maybe if I can convince you, I'll buy you a couple bottles and you can come into Nashville someday and meet all my members, and they would love to talk to you. I think it would be great.
Hey, Nashville is a great city. I'd love to come there.
Bring your wife, your kids. It's a fun city. And you know what we could do? They have these pedal taverns. I don't know. Have you ever been to Nashville?
I haven't been to Nashville in about 15 years.
Oh my God.
Wouldn't recognize it. Yeah.
You wouldn't even recognize. Yeah.
I believe
It is now the bride to be, like, bachelorette party capital of the world. And so there's like all these bachelorette parties going on, and they have these things called pedal taverns, and you sit at this like long, it looks like a picnic table with wheels, and there's a bartender in the middle, and you drink and you have to pedal and they steer through this. It's crazy. Have you seen that?
I have not, but that sounds awesome. There's I'm in South Texas right now, and unfortunately we didn't get a chance to go because it was raining the weekend that they had it, but they have something called Smoking on the Rio, which is their state championship contest for smoking meat, if you will.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They have this something similar to that, only way bigger. It's like this manufactured covered wagon type thing that just flips open, and they have all these chairs in it. It sounds similar, but it's just a covered wagon version.
Okay. Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, again,
and I do happen to like country music, so I mean, if something could work out, I'd be in.
All right, man. We'll have to look at that. July, maybe we'll bring you in July because, we got boot camp coming up in April, which you're welcome to come, but that we got the agenda already set, but it's very cool. But yeah, cheers to you, my friend. Thank you again for sharing with us. I really do appreciate it, taking time with us and our members, and I'm sure they've loved this. This is phenomenal. So thank you again. And let's get together in Nashville. Now, where'd he go? Wait a minute. Where'd he go?
Tom's out.
He's out. He's
it's
like, I'm
Seacrest.
Yeah.
Like, McDougall out.
He just dropped the mic.
We're
Where'd he go?
So
yeah. Oh, there he is. Where Tom, where'd you go? I think he
froze. So
see,
this is a high class, high end production.
You can tell that, like, we're all drinking, we're all like, yeah.
We don't even know if Tom's still with us here.
He's not. All I can see is like Tom's like Hawaiian shirt thingy there. That's okay. All right. What do we do, Mike? Do we just end? This is very this is
yeah. I don't know. We've never hit this before, but I think we just wrap up here on a high note. Thank you, Tom, if you can hear us. It seems like it froze on your end, but
yeah.
Thank you, Robin.
In Fargo, he probably got frozen, but it's like I can't even. Terrible. All right.
But enjoy the rest of your dinner.
Okay. Oh, he's gone. Yeah.
Yep.
He's like, I'm out. All right. Very cool.
Okay, guys.
All right.
Wait.
What?
Here he is. He was in the waiting room. Now he rejoined. Apparently he had something. Oh, look at this.
We got all right, Tom, what happened? Where'd you go?
He's connecting to audio.
My laptop just quit. So now I'm on.
We're like, Tom's just out.
Well, what's funny? I'll tell you something. So I had Robert Herjavec, a guy you don't know. So I had him on stage once. I mean, like, we're in the middle of this presentation. We're on stage. Well, and let me kind of set this. Okay. So we had a 2-part interview, right? So we had the interview, we had a break, and then we had the continuation. So I interview him on stage. We're on, I don't know, an hour and a half, something like that. We go to I said, okay, we're going to take a break. And he goes, let's not take a break. Let's just keep going. And I'm like, okay, well, the audience, we're going to go on break, but he's going to sit here and ask questions. So I was like, all right. I said, are you sure you're okay? He's like, no, this is great. Let's keep going. So then we come back on live because he spent and like, we're in the middle, we're doing like a Shark Tank. So you'd have to know Shark Tank. We're doing like the Shark Tank interview, and we got a client that's there on stage, and I'm talking to the client's sitting between me and Robert. And all of a sudden Robert looks at me and he's like kind of bouncing his seat. He goes, I got to go to the bathroom. And he literally, in the middle of my seminar, gets up to go potty. And I just sat there and looked at the audience. I'm like, okay, I've never had that happen before. So I thought we were having another one of those moments, but okay. So I think we're good though.
Yeah, no warning, no nothing, just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, I said enough, I'm out. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm good. So,
Yeah, I'm supposed to shut up.
all right. All right, Tom, again, thank you so much, man. We'll have to have you in Nashville someday.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Thanks, Robin.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.
Bye, audience.
Have a good
Bye now.
weekend.